Hey, Clete, how's it going?
Great. It's a great day today. Yeah. Wow. Every day's a
It's
great
a
day.
great day, and I'm back at the slow upload technology location.
So far, and I'm knocking on wood on my on the ground right now, which is wood. But it's been fine as we've been talking so far. So we'll see how it goes. But
Well,
it's been better than it
there's
was last.
time. There's plenty of time for it to go worse.
Okay. Well, I mean, first things first. Let's say. I guess I should say we don't have an interview this week. It's just David and I talking about some news things. So
Yes.
welcome to the Attractions Group podcast. We're gonna have a great episode, but I got to
Yeah.
jump right in. So
We gotta have the greeting for the 2 or 3 people listening. I get it.
yeah, right. That's important.
There we go.
We have 2 new SeaWorld parks that are going to be in the style of the SeaWorld Park on Yas Island in the UAE in Abu Dhabi. 2 new
Mhm.
parks that are going to be coming soon to a theater near you. Except not near you because they're both going to be international, but we have no idea where. They literally said nothing. What in the
So
world? Did you see
in
this
Abu
coming?
Dhabi, so
Mm.
so that well, when you see Disney making large announcements that they're going overseas, it's another part going there, and even if they're not going to be managed, so to speak, it's still going to have the Disney tag on it. So once they're doing
Yeah.
that, and Universal is making a huge market expansion, so
Yeah.
you can only think that probably number 3 in the whole theme park game, SeaWorld or whatever you call them, United Parks. They did change their name from SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment to more of a, I would say, more inclusive title that, hey, we're not just SeaWorld Busch Gardens anymore. Who knows if it's going to be SeaWorld Park? It could be a Busch Gardens park. It could be acquisition of another park. No one really knows. But it
Yeah.
only makes sense that probably the next largest organization with capital to go out and expand would be SeaWorld.
Yeah.
I
And they've
don't
been
care if it's United Parks. It's still SeaWorld. It'll always be SeaWorld.
That's so fair. It's really interesting. I think United Parks is a really awesome company. I think they do great work. I love those
Absolutely.
parks. I do. And I think it's a little bit different, obviously, than your Universals and Disney's because they're not really, they have the Sesame Street characters, but they're not as IP heavy. They're not as storytelling driven, although they are very immersive. I will say it's not like you're not themed. You're in the theming. It's just a little different. You're in the ocean.
I can let and I'm going to raise my hand again because I don't know if we're
Y-
going to have the lag on the recording or not. So you know that,
Yeah.
hey, I got a thought, so we can plan for that. Dumb question, because a lot of the things on there, and of course my byline, I am an existential threat to democracy. I think that's either going to get me into political office or drive clicks to the site. I don't know. If somebody searches
100%.
that, maybe we'll get lucky and they'll pull it up. But that said, it is in we don't tend to be in political, but certain things that happen externally in the theme park industry do have its origins of a political nature.
Sure.
That said, with PBS kind of again their funding cut, which I don't care where you sit on that spectrum. That's not what I brought that up about. But if you did mention that SeaWorld or United Parks has Sesame Street, Sesame Street is a cousin to Muppets. Yeah, sometimes there's been some crossover things there. But that said, what happens to that IP? Is Sesame Street going to continue on in some manner or form, or did it live and die through PBS?
I think it'll be immortalized somehow. They're too
Okay.
like the characters are too important.
Yeah.
If you look there's many different stories of this, but like let's take Garfield for example. The
Okay.
cat. He's gets his origins in comic strips, and
Uh-huh.
although you can probably still find Garfield comic strips somewhere, I don't know, but I bet you can. That's not like the kids of today don't know Garfield from the comic strips. They know him because
Right.
there was that I think it's Animal Logic movie that came out like 2 years ago that had, Garfield. And then there was the movie in the 90s with
Right.
Garfield. And,
Mhm.
he's Garfield. He's just kind of an icon. I think if it had been a little earlier, maybe the Sesame Street would have died with PBS, getting having their funding cut. But they're iconic characters. Somebody's gonna pick them up, whether it's for a movie or for a new TV series, maybe a book series, whatever it is. I'm sure somebody will pick them up.
I
And
think so too.
in
Good.
the short term, even if they did die, in the short term, I think it still makes sense to have them in the parks because people still love those characters and
Right.
people still know them right now too. So, but yeah, that is
Maybe
a good
still
point.
relevant for at least another generation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you just brought that up, and I thought it was kind of an interesting thought. Oh, hey, if that goes away, which I can't imagine that the. I mean, they just say that the Corporation for Public Broadcast, kind of a tongue twist, but that it is going by the wayside, which would mean that the when you get the rabbit ears out and you're doing the channel scan to find out what kind of channels you can get on your TV that has no cable on it or anything hardlined into it, if there's 50 channels that come up, 30 of them are PBS stations, which is interesting. So yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting because there's a lot of those that it is an IP. Those characters are iconic, and it's kind of surprising that there's only is it Sesame Place. There's only one location, right?
Two Sesame Places, one in Philadelphia and
Okay,
one in San Diego. Yeah.
right. So, but the other United Parks, SeaWorld and Busch Gardens Brands do not have. Is that correct? They don't have them there.
They have the characters, but they're not to the same extent. Like they'll
Okay.
SeaWorld Orlando has a little Sesame Place area, but it's not like the full on parks that they have in California and
Yeah.
PA. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
Yeah. It really will. It really will.
Side note,
They,
I sidetracked you, so sorry. Go back.
oh yes.
I'll
Well, what I
talk
was
about
gonna
that
say
next.
though too is that the characters are not super embedded in the ride experiences, which is where you kind of differ from your Universals and Disney's. But if you look at SeaWorld Abu Dhabi compared to their parks in the US, and so we think about like what it means to be in the style of SeaWorld Abu Dhabi, I mean, the thing it means is that it's inside. That's the difference. Like that's the biggest.
Mhm.
It's there's more focus actually on the animals there, and that's something SeaWorld has kind of been getting away from and being focused more towards rides, obviously, since
Mhm.
the early 2010s. But they, it's done in a different way. It's a lot more like aquarium style SeaWorld Abu Dhabi because it's indoor. It's huge, like you're surrounded by aquariums on all four walls. It's 2 stories. It's 30 acres, which is really, really small for a theme park. Of course, it is 2 stories, but 30 acres is like a tenth of what Cedar Point is, for
Right.
example. But even though it's 30 acres, it cost $2 billion to build, which I mean, Epic Universe cost about $9 billion to build, and that is so much bigger than the 30-acre park. So I'm interested to see if they go to the same level of like detail and immersion that the parks that have the Yas Island Moral Group money.
No,
But I don't
I
know.
they don't need to
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
because their IPs aren't as I don't like saying the word. They're not as creative. I mean, any IP that SeaWorld would have, or I'm sorry, United Parks would have, it isn't like a Harry Potter. It's not like
Right,
a
exactly.
Toy Story. So I
Yeah.
mean, they don't have to be as. When you go to SeaWorld Orlando, for instance, that's the only one I've been to. I was in San Diego, the one a long time ago. I
Mm,
don't really remember a whole lot about it, but the one in Orlando, Journey to Atlantis,
right.
that's not really attached to an IP, is it? Not that
No,
I know of.
no,
And
it's just
it is
Atlantis.
pretty well themed.
Super well themed.
It's a, you don't necessarily have to have an IP to a famous whatever it may be to have an immersive ride.
That's true. That's true. I mean, and they've kept that up too. Like Journey to Atlantis is an original, but like Expedition Odyssey, their new for 2025 attraction at
Mhm.
SeaWorld Orlando, is a beautiful nature themed, kind of flying theater, kind of like Soarin'. and it's a delightful ride. It's a really interesting ride mechanism because like on Soarin', you're used to like you fly up, and on Expedition Odyssey, basically
Hmm.
you board and then you spin like your whole line of people. You guys spin, and then the big flying theater screen is behind you. So that's kind of a interesting mechanism. But yeah, I don't know the things. I wonder a lot of things, but we cannot talk about this without at least trying to speculate on where these parks might be headed, at least in a macro sense.
I don't know. Now, there isn't a lot of expansion from Disney or Universal or other parks for that matter. Six Flags, previous to the merger, or Cedar Fair for that matter. And Cedar Fair usually was mostly U.S. and Canada, and Six Flags dealt a little bit out of that.
Yep.
Not a lot of expansion park wise into South America. What do you think of that? Would they try to do it Brazil or
I think somebody's got to build a beautiful, beautiful theme park resort in Brazil, and I think it should be me personally, but that's a different conversation. Uh yeah, I think Brazil is brilliant. If you could do it in Brasilia or you could do it in Rio. The theme park enthusiasm that exists in Brazil is so untapped. They all just come to Walt Disney World, which is
they do?
awesome,
And they're the ones that hold the flags up, and you see
right?
this massive people, and you see all the people that aren't from Brazil running to get in front of them in line because once they get there,
Yeah,
your wait time just went up 30 minutes.
yeah, yeah. It's a really interesting thing, and I don't think that'll stop. But I do think if I'm SeaWorld, and I'd say yeah, I think Brazil makes a lot of sense. I also we are seeing that new, and forgive me, I forget the name, but on like the southwest coast of Mexico, they're building a nice resort there. Some private equity company is, so that's going to be interesting to see a new theme park go up in Mexico, in Latin America. So I definitely think Brazil is a good option. That's a good. I like that. Or similarly,
Where
maybe
else did you think?
Argentina in Buenos Aires if you're going to
Just
do
just
South
somewhere down there.
America. Yeah, yeah.
Where
That
where
is, of
else did
course,
you think?
oh, worldwide. I do think if they know they have their parks where they have their parks, generally every SeaWorld park is next to an area where there's some population of attractions tourism. Yas Island, Los Angeles is San Diego,
Hmm.
Orlando, Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, and Tampa, not as much, but those are the Busch Gardens parks. It's a little different. They purchase them. So I'm thinking maybe like a Tokyo, because then they would be able to be next to, your Tokyo Disney, Nagashima Spa Land, Fuji Q. They'd be, or Osaka, because in Osaka they'd be next to Universal Studios Japan. But it just seems like the idea of finding 100 acres in Osaka that's not developed is like I don't know.
Well,
I don't know, but it seems difficult.
their Abu Dhabi one's going to be 2 stories. Maybe the one in Osaka would be 10.
Yeah,
You just
exactly. They'll build
get
a
the acreage
skyscraper theme park.
going vertical. Yeah, as strange as that sounds, it's not out of their own possibility.
Yeah, it's not. They have a park in Australia that's through an operating agreement. They kind of have a park in Australia. It's different. It's kind of like their parks in America. So I don't think
Hmm.
Australia. Similarly to kind of you know, they want to be next to other parks. They could try to do a Shanghai, or they could try to do, Hong Kong. Hong Kong is one that's like, I don't know how you're getting land there, but I don't know. I think somewhere where there's probably already maybe a Disney or a Universal park around there so that they can, help bring up the whole area. But
You
it
think
could be an
so?
independent thing like your Rio or your Buenos Aires ideas. I don't know. I think they're both good
You
ideas.
think so? Or would they want to be the first to arrive? Or you could do
Yeah,
things like Brazil. You could run the table.
you definitely could. That's a really great point. And then you can use that as like, hey, I know you go to Walt Disney World, but look how cool SeaWorld in Brazil is. Now you should go to
Hmm.
SeaWorld Orlando, and you should go to SeaWorld or
Right.
Busch Gardens Tampa or whatever it might be. So that's helpful too. Yeah, being the first in has huge benefits. And maybe it's one of each situation. I will say, we none of us have said it, and I think that's for good reason. I don't really see Europe being the place where
I
either of
don't
these
either.
parks are going. Yeah.
Yeah, Europe is pretty well mature as far as theme parks are concerned. With the Universal going there, I think you can make the argument that the theme parks in Europe, for the most part, they are theme parks. They're well themed, probably a lot better than any non-Disney Universal park in the United States, with the exception of a handful. But the,
Yeah.
the level of theming that is involved in some of the experiences they have, I, you got to go to a Dollywood, a Knott's Berry Farm, or
Yep.
a Silver Dollar City to get even close to it.
Yeah, you do. You really do. And there's also in Europe they have like they have a lot of playgrounds and
Mhm.
big open picnic areas and things of that nature that are like a little weird for our my at least perception of like the concrete
Mhm.
jungle that a theme park is often. So that's very interesting. But yeah, I don't see it happening. The UK is with Universal going in. I don't think they'd want to try to get. That seems like a little too much,
Yeah.
and there's nowhere else I would really see in Europe that would make a little
And
less
for
sense.
what it's worth, I also think, even though they're opening the one in Abu Dhabi,
Mm.
that I think I would be surprised if in the next 3 to 5 years that you see any more big announcements of things going to the Middle East, because it's been hot topic for probably 3 to 5 years of new
Yeah,
places opening up in the Middle East, and they're trying to take generally an oil economy and turn it into a tourism economy,
yeah,
so that as time goes on and more emphasis on fossil fuel driven vehicles switches over to whatever that may be. I don't think electric's it, but whatever that may be, it'll be interesting to see how these develop, because I think a lot of money has gone into develop these places, and I think a lot of other organizations are now thinking, okay, let's see how this plays out, what the demand is, because most of the tourism has to fly in, and you have to spend probably easily four figures on one plane ticket before you even spend money to go to the park or stay in a hotel. So I think it's going to be touch and go. I think it'll be overall successful in the end, but it might take it. It may not catch on quite as quickly as what some people are thinking, and
yeah.
that's just me talking.
Well, I will say the parks in the Middle East right now have a reputation for being empty. So I don't think you're totally off base. I think you're
Well,
making some sense.
when it's 120 degrees by day, that's
Yeah,
just that part of the world's hot. So that's
yeah.
then you have people,
Well,
but it's a dry heat. Yeah, but it's still 120.
yeah. A lot of the parks though, they have like SeaWorld's inside, Motion Gate is outside and not like Motion Gate like woof. But a lot of the parks are either inside or just like outdoor air conditioned, like what Disney and
Yeah.
Six Flags Kidea City are going to be. So that's pretty crazy.
That said, the people now I have not been to one in the Middle East personally.
Mm.
I know people who have, and everybody who's been to at least one park, maybe up to three, they're all positive reviews,
Oh
because
yeah, I mean I've heard they're
the
amazing.
level of money and investment, there's no choice for it but to be good. So it's been good, but at the same time, before you spend $1 on going to the park, you have to get there first of all, because it's not like you can't drive there from the United States. You can't ride a train there from the United States. You have to take a flight with several layovers to get there. So before you get into the park, you're still spending quite a bit of money in investment just to get there.
Last note on this for me from me anyway. Potential places where these parks could be going, and kind of a segue into what you just said as well, is the world's fastest growing economy is India. Their population is booming. There are huge tech sectors that are popping up and just creating a lot of noise in the technology space. I think it would make sense if from SeaWorld also to maybe to put a park in India. And I think that in the Middle East, a lot of the tourism we're going to see in 10 or 15 years to the Middle Eastern parks will be from people from India. It's way less far to go
Mhm.
from there than it is from, the United Kingdom or the United States, certainly. And it's a supernatural group to try to advertise to if you're in the Middle East and you see this
Mhm.
growing economy just, a few thousand miles away rather than a few 10,000 miles away. So that's a little better.
Right. And if we look on a map, it looks like, well, India is just around the corner from the Middle East, which On a map, it is, but it's if I'm not mistaken, it's almost like saying that it's just around the corner to go from Maine to Los Angeles.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
it's
not
probably
that.
about the same, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
by map standards, yes, it is around the corner, but still quite a significant travel to get there.
for sure, for sure. So the another major piece of attractions industry news this week. Hit
I
me.
know where you're going. Yes. Well, you go with it, because what would an attractions group podcast be for at least the last couple months without some story coming up about
The Six Flags chain. So the Six Flags chain had their a little bit of an earnings report for quarter three or for quarter two.
Mhm.
Um,
Yes.
and you know, afterwards, as you may have seen, CEO Richard Zimmerman stepped down from his role in the Six Flags chain.
Right.
This is, as it seems, mostly because of some pressure from the board and
Right. The stockholders.
right, exactly, from the stockholders, and sort of in very direct response to this earnings report. It was the same day that it was announced. There's no exact succession plan. We don't know what's going to be next exactly for that position in particular, but I gotta say, I'm surprised, and I think especially you had heard a lot of things about this chain and about how they were doing this year, and this is the first time we get like some tangibles of how they're doing this year.
Mhm.
And to be honest, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I thought it is bad. If you want to go look, they've lost 9 figures this year. It's bad. They cannot live like this for 2 more years.
Right.
They could. It's not going to happen. But I honestly I thought it would be worse. I also would like to say that I'm a little surprised that Zimmerman's was kind of pushed out from the like if it was as bad as I thought it was going to be, Zimmerman being, asked to leave, step down, made a little more sense to me. You lost about $100 million and you have about $900 million, $950 million in revenue. Of course, the company is $5 billion in debt. So losing
Yeah.
even a dollar is really bad news because you're adding to your huge pile of debt and you're paying interest and you're certainly not taking away from any of that. But nonetheless, revenue's good. David, what do you think?
Wow. How long do we have? Because I mean, there's a lot to unpack in it. It's not all good. It's not all bad. It's not all good. I think if anyone thought that the earnings report was going to be good, I mean, it really, there's nothing surprising in the outcome of it. Now, I'm a little surprised that they're not giving Zimmerman a little more time to round the bottom and try to aim up. But at the same time, if you're a shareholder, and I don't have the stats right in front of me, but I know that the last trading number that it had last week, and let's be honest, they are trying to please shareholders. That's what
Of
this is all
course.
about. That's who holds the money. So at the same time, when the merger was announced, I believe, and someone can fact check me on this. I should have looked at the stat before I'm just spouting my mouth off, but I believe the shares were worth about $46 a share. I think
Yeah.
in that neighborhood, somewhere between 45 and 50. And it had a little bit of a bump after the merger was announced, and then a little bit of a bump again once they knew they were going to, it cleared all the hurdles. It's trading at half of that now. So people that have held on to their stocks, people that have the votes on what happens on the board, are saying my money's worth half of what it was a year ago. We need changes at the top.
Yeah.
Now, anyone who followed SeaWorld Parks years ago when the whole Blackfish thing came through and they're having to reorganize SeaWorld knows that whether or not it is the CEO's fault when the share price goes down and people are left with holding half the money they had months before, heads need to roll. Sorry, you just happen to be victim of circumstance and being where you are. Jim Atchison, who was the CEO of SeaWorld at the time, did everything that happened. He probably shared some of the blame, but a lot of the stuff, most of it wasn't his fault, but he was the guy at the top. Sorry, that's just unfortunate circumstances. When Blackfish came out, I knew the person who was, I don't know if he's chief marketing officer. He was a marketing officer of some manner or form on the SeaWorld side. Unfortunately, they had Busch Gardens, which carried them through that, which didn't get the tainted name from
Yeah.
Blackfish. But I reposted a interview that we had with Joel Manby, former CEO of SeaWorld, last week sometime. I reposted that, and he had said that Busch Gardens was the savior of that, and a lot of the things that happened weren't necessarily their fault. But when CNN was playing Blackfish, in his words, 500 times a night, you're going to get black eye out of it. And the marketing person I know, we had met, myself and a colleague had met in his office sometime in, I don't know, April of that year, whatever it was, 2014, April. We'd met in there, and the line was, every once in a while, these protests come up. We've learned that if we give them a lot of airtime on it, it just grows, and we've learned to keep our responses light and let it build, and then it dissipates, and then until the next time it comes along. Blackfish was a different story. Someone actually died, and tragically that happened, but then the story took on a life of its own, whereas ignoring the story didn't work. And by the time they realized they had to change strategy, it already was killing the brand. Therefore, when the stock value is worth half of what it was previously, doesn't matter whose fault it is or if it's no one's fault, heads have to roll.
Yeah, that you're right.
Unfortunately, that's probably what we're seeing here.
Yeah, and it's also a little unfortunate. Like, we've talked about this a million times, also, but like the fact that Six Flags is a publicly traded company means those earnings reports have to come out. And not only do the shareholders have to deal with like their own money being worth half as much as it was before, but the if you're on the board, you're thinking, well, also we need like to get people to be interested in purchasing our stock, we
Right.
need things to change. Like if you need people to buy your stock for the stock price to increase. So I'm sure even if they believe in Richard Zimmerman and that he can turn the company around long term, they need people to be buying the stock right now. Even if they
Right.
liked him personally, even from the perspective of the shareholder, it's not even necessarily about, I don't like this guy. It's about, we need the public opinion to feel like things are changing. And that will, hopefully put us in a position where people want to buy our stock and people will want to pay a little bit more for it, hopefully. So, yeah, I don't know, but it is a tough, I mean, and $5 billion of debt for a company that has maybe, 1.5 trillion in revenue a year, or sorry. I mean, yes, what 1.5 billion, obviously not trillion. But that's really, really scary place to be. I mean, if you're in a position where you could put all of your revenue towards just paying off your debts. You don't pay a single bill. You don't pay a single employee. You don't pay anything like this, and you can't get out of debt for 4 or 5 years. That is oof. That's not good. And
Yeah.
we're in a business where we leveraging debt's a huge part of theme parks. They spend $40 million on Rapterra. They're not going to make that back in a year. It's not possible.
Right.
A lot of the money you spend in a theme park is about helping the guest experience in an abstract way that's going to make your product worth coming to. It's really difficult to measure. Even if you say like these people wouldn't have come without Orion, you can try your best to try to figure all that stuff out, but it's really hard to try to actually have a good ROI approximate on a $40 million roller coaster. And I do think like, yes, debts need to be leveraged and all that, but I think that the thing we're going to have to see over the next 4 or 5 years from the chain is just a bit of a downturn in the money they're spending on keeping their parks cutting edge. They can add a few things. They need to add a few things to keep people coming back. Shows, extra entertainment offerings. You focus on providing the guest experience you can. That's good. But I do think, as much as I'm a firm believer that parks need to change and stay updating, they do. But parks need to stay alive too because they're businesses. So I think right now maybe it's going to be a big downturn in investments over the next just 3 years. That's all you need. Then get back to spending some money, leverage your debts again. But I don't think we're gonna see much after the and with like Zimmerman leaving. And Mike Coons is gone. Who's to say Kings Island's gonna get that new family attraction next year? Right now, I don't know.
It
Maybe it's gonna
depends.
get shelved. We'll see.
Well, like a lot of the roller coasters that are getting installed next year, those contracts are probably signed before
This
the
is true.
merger happened. So this
Yep.
family thrill attraction is probably the contract was signed before the earnings report. So it's probably well, I don't know if you contracted XYZ company to do this, can you really pull out of it in the fourth quarter? I
No.
don't think so.
No. Right.
So yeah, now a couple of things that unfortunately when it comes to the whole Six Flags debacle financially and what's happening right now. And I mean, honestly, I mean, look at some of the things that have happened. It looks like literally Sideshow Bob stepping on every rake in the yard from a guest experience standpoint this year with what's happened in the Six Flags chain. That said, when the earnings report comes out, people can try to paint it any way they want. They can make it look better. They can try to make it look worse, or I'm sorry, try to make it look better. They make it not as bad, or it can look worse. Depending on which way you want to interpret it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't give context. It's just numbers on a sheet. Now, if you live
Yep.
in the Midwest, which I'm in the Midwest, Cincinnati, you're very familiar with the weather here. Early in the summer,
Yep.
I think I said on podcast back then we're in month number 3 of March,
Yep.
which the early part of summer was really cold, which is really bad if you have a water park. And so there's a lot of people didn't go because quite frankly, early in the season, the night times are cold. Okay. Then it got warm. Then guess what happened in the Midwest? The 17-year cycle cicadas came out. So who among us wants to ride a roller coaster and have a cicada, like 50 cicadas smack in your face?
Not me.
Plus, if you're like my family, cicadas, they land on your shoulder, they look at you, and that's all they do. I'm not bothered by cicadas. My entire family, including my oldest daughter, who you know, she wouldn't go. She did not. She stayed indoors for that 8 week run of the 6 to 8 week run of the cicadas. So attendance at their Midwestern parks had to have been affected by the cicadas. And Kings Island was one of their leading parks. So when you have number one cold weather, and then right after the cold weather it regulates to whatever summertime is, then you have these cicadas that are driving people away. Yeah, you're gonna have a bad summer. I do know that going there the last couple of days, the parking lot's been full now. School's getting ready to ramp up, so people are getting their last gasps of summer in. But I honestly, to bridge out of what I'm talking about, I think that honestly, to go forward, whatever the new leadership is, they got to come up with different ideas. Now, the press release that you and I both read said succession plan, so that leads me to think that maybe they're considering an internal candidate. But I think
Probably.
shareholders are going to. I don't know if I'm a shareholder. I with no context to anything, without knowing what the talent pool is, I would be thinking out external candidate. But number two, they may have to part with one of their marquee properties for a large injection of cash to pay down some debt. That's
Hey, Matt.
and who knows which park that would be. And then also among all that, and I've said a lot, their Cedar Fair is known for peanuts. Six Flags is known for DC and Looney Tunes. Ryan and Don on their Tower Topics podcast, they had an episode, maybe 2 episodes, on the fact that I just got a message from Don on my phone. Because we're talking about the season pass thing, that the very cheap season passes that they just rolled out. We don't have time to get into that today, but Peanuts is expiring. It's going to cost them money to re-up that. Six Flags already has DC Looney Tunes, one that I think runs through 2053. So are the Legacy Cedar Fair parks going to go with no IP, or are they going to become DC and Looney Tunes? I think it's very telling. I have no context, I haven't been in conversation with anybody, that a lot of Peanut stuff and Orion stuff at Kings Island, they're having clearance rack sales on those. Is that a foreshadowing?
Well, I will say I got to push back a little bit there. I think
Okay, push.
see Carowinds, huge new Peanuts area this year. if they thought there was any chance that they weren't going to renew that contract, why would they build that? Even Camp Snoopy. And I get that they thought they might be in a different financial situation with Camp Snoopy, but I don't. I just think they're going to renew their contract. If the fact that the Warner Brothers deal doesn't expire until 2053 is crazy. I didn't know that. That's wild. I can't believe it goes through that far. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I could totally see. I could totally see them just them re. If they don't do
I
it, it'll save them the money of not having to pay for the Peanuts properties, but they're gonna have to take down everything. That's not cheap either. A lot of things are
no,
gonna need repainted. A lot of merchandise, like how much money do they make from selling Snoopy plushies? That's gone. I don't think they can justify it to themselves even to not pay for that.
you know, I don't think so either. But if you're running a unified company that had two brands coming in merging, and one's got Peanuts, one's got, and it leaves DC Comics. I could actually see some DC Comics coming in and infiltrating some of this legacy Cedar Fair parks. But when it comes to the kids area for Peanuts versus Looney Tunes, are you going to have a large park system with two very separate IPs? Does that make sense to do that from a branding standpoint when they've consolidated a lot of their marketing operations, or do you make them more homogenized and replace one IP with the other? I don't know. I think it's telling that it expires at the end of the year. There really hasn't been any indication that they're going to renew. There hasn't really been any indication that they're not, but it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yes, it will. That's for sure. I am very curious. I mean, if they don't renew it, they will have to have everything gone before those kids areas can open up in 2026.
Yeah,
That's
they did that before when Cedar Fair bought Worlds of Adventure up in Geauga Lake.
yeah,
They dethemed that in an off season when they decided they were going to take the Nickelodeon stuff out of the Paramount parks. That was done in an off season. I mean,
yeah.
it's possible, but it'll be interesting because we were looking at Nickelodeon stuff in the fall, and then bam, spring, Snoopy.
Yeah, yeah, that is crazy. The last thing I will say though, and we can hop off of here. We've been yapping for a while just about these two things. Um, but the one more thing I do want to say is that for Cedar Fair parks, Haunt is hugely successful. Fright
Mhm.
Fest and Six Flags is a big deal. It's not as big of a deal as Haunt is. Haunt, not Scary Farm. This is the time of year where this legacy Cedar Fair parks have the opportunity to pick up some weight and really help the chain out a lot. I think if Haunt and potentially their earnings report still said they're on track for $70 million more worth of corporate synergies, which I'm surprised that they're not lowering that estimate now, but they say no, we still got 70 million more incoming. And so if that's true and they can have a haunt that's not as affected by the weather and that has a huge turnout with their, what is the new IP that Kings Island bought for theirs? What
Conjuring.
Yeah, the Conjuring. I mean, that could be pretty cool. So if this haunt can go well, and then they can get their Six Flags America land sale done, and eventually their California's Great America, you know, California's Great America land sale slash parking lot sale. We'll see how they divide
They've
up that
already
land.
sold the land, haven't they? They're only leasing it back. I
Really?
thought the
When?
singles had done. I thought. Well, I have to look that up. But
I
I thought they
believe
were
that
just
because
doing a lease back on it.
that makes sense, and that's when they announced that the park would be closing before 2030. That's what happened. That's definitely possible. Well,
Yeah.
the still though they get to stop paying that bill. They get to sell some of
Right.
the rides, move them to some other parks, and so forth. And they will sell the land at Six Flags America. That'll be good. And then maybe
Right.
they do close another park, sell another park, and then
I think,
you
in
take a
my
few years
personal
off
opinion,
investing. I do still think they have a bright future. Is the point I'm getting at?
I do. I really do because there's a lot of successful parks in that chain, and they're not going
Yeah,
to go into failures overnight. And they're not going to go to fail because they're very entrenched into the communities that they're in. So they have no
yeah,
choice but to. Fortunately, those people will be there when everything gets back on track. I'm just thinking that to solve a lot of short-term problems that are going to be dogging them for a while from a shareholder standpoint, that they may have to part with one of their marquee parks in a sale, not necessarily close it down, but sell for top dollar to get a large injection of cash. And maybe if people go into the comments section, which park do you, not as a spiteful thing, but what park do you think that might be? I don't say that to be negative. I just think that if a family gets into financial trouble, but they got a really nice car, that's
You sell it.
they're paying money for. What do you do? Well, to correct some financial things that happen, you sell the car, or you sell the house, and you downsize a little bit. And I think that's probably what's going to have to happen in the short term for the Six Flags chain.
It would also be
I
interesting.
don't think it's going to be negative. Competition
Yeah.
makes companies better. So if they were to have to part with, I'm just, since Kings Island's in our backyard, if they had, because Six Flags,
They would never sell Kings
never part
Island.
with. Well, they would never sell Cedar Point either. Like, even more so, if they were forced to sell one of them, they wouldn't sell Cedar Point. So I would venture to say that competition between Kings Island and Cedar Point is a healthy thing for both locations, because it makes them better.
But when you're a company, you don't think, dang, to make my parks better, I really want competition. Like, it does make them better. It would make the guest experience better. There's zero doubt about that. But that doesn't mean like it's helpful as a business strategy to like make competition for yourself, to have to spend money to compete with. So I don't know. I think maybe a sale is a good move.
If the shareholders force it, which is going to get you more money? Because they're not going to sell the Six Flags Park in Los Angeles. They're not going to sell Knott's Berry Farm. So which ones get you? And you say they're not going to sell Kings Island. I think that, which is going to fetch you more money, a Kings Island or a Valley Fair?
Well, definitely, but it matters how much these parks are in debt. Like, how much do you owe on the attractions that are at those parks? Because if you're Valley Fair and you haven't got a new coaster in a while, you're selling it, you could get some money, but also you didn't clear off any real debt, so there's no reason, so I think you'd sell like Dorney Park. Maybe you sell Dorney Park. They have a B&M dive coaster sitting on their bottom line, and it's in
Dorney
Pennsylvania.
Park's been a bit of the hot potato. They were Six Flags, and they weren't Six Flags, and they're Six Flags again, and then that they've been a bit of the hot potato the last 20 years.
Maybe sell them to SeaWorld. Then they can have Sesame Place and have another SeaWorld park next to their Sesame Place.
Okay, that's a whole nother can to open. I mean, because how much different would this have looked 2 or 3 years ago? I forget when it was, when SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment, when they're still operated by that name, had knocked on Cedar Fair's door about a possible buyout. How much different would this look?
Maybe that's our episode next week. We just talk about how different it would be if SeaWorld now owned Cedar Fair.
I think it's going to be, we're kind of late to the game on this anyway. It's probably going to be old news by next week anyway.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
So, all right. Well, actually, we got a lot more mileage on this than I thought we would. But
yeah, we just be talking. Okay, well, good stuff, guys. Thanks for checking out the Attractions Group podcast. Let us know what you think about all our crazy takes and so forth in the comments. And
yes,
if you were Cedar Fair's CEO, Six Flags' CEO, and you did decide, the shareholders told you, hey man, you got to sell a park. What park are you going to sell? Yeah, tell us why. We'd love to hear it. Maybe we'll talk about some of the responses next week.
Yes,
David. Peace.
Have a great one. Boom.